good evening. Tonight we will be discussing the Principles of Wiccan Belief. It's important to remember that these principles do not apply to all Wiccans all of the time. They do not apply to every branch of Wicca, but they are a good starting point when you are first starting to learn about Wicca. So these principles first came into being in 1974. The Council of American Witches came together in an attempt to define Wiccan beliefs. This was really a monumental task because you have to remember that Wicca is, by its very nature, a vibrant and flexible religion. It doesn't fit well inside a box, and writing Principles of Belief is attempting to define the box. That being the case, these principles are deliberately vague. There's a reason for that. It's so that it is possible to take those principles and apply them to most types of Wicca. Not all, but most. So it was hoped that these principles of belief could encompass all traditions of Wicca while giving the public a basic understanding of what Wicca is and what it is not. Though that council did disband that same year, so it wasn't around very long, the principles of Wiccan belief have endured. They are still referenced and they are still used by many around the Wiccan community when we're first teaching young people about what Wicca is and, more importantly, what it is not. So these principles of Wiccan belief have been adapted, or at least some of them have, by most modern Wiccan traditions. So we're going to talk about, first of all, the introduction to these beliefs, and then I'll read it verbatim, and then we'll talk a little bit about what each point means. At least those points that are not very clear. Again, they were deliberately vague, so when I give you an interpretation, that interpretation is subject to a lot of different factors, and there are a lot of different ways to interpret each of these beliefs. So let's start with the introduction. So the introduction says, specifically, in seeking to be inclusive, we do not wish to open ourselves to the destruction of our group by those on self-serving power trips or to philosophies and practices contradictory to these principles. In seeking to exclude those whose ways are contradictory to ours, we do not want to deny participation with us to any who are sincerely interested in our knowledge and beliefs, regardless of race, color, sex, age, national or cultural origins, or sexual preferences. So the reason this is written that way is because the idea was Wicca should accept everyone who genuinely wishes to learn about Wicca, who is generally interested in Wicca, but should not accept those people who are entering a group only to cause problems, only to bring everyone down, only to constantly tell everyone that's not right, you can't do it that way. Those are the kind of people you want to exclude because they're really annoying, and nobody wants to be in a group with those people because they're really annoying. But the idea was we're going to include everyone unless there's a reason to exclude them. So there has to be an actual reason. We're not going to exclude someone just because we don't like that they're 24 instead of 27. So you're not discriminating based on age, none of that. But you can discriminate based on people who shouldn't be in your group because they're disruptive to your group. So that's kind of the point there. So the first principle of Wiccan belief, read verbatim, we practice rites to attune ourselves with the natural rhythm of life forces marked by the phases of the moon and the seasonal quarters and cross quarters. So what does this mean? This one's actually pretty self-explanatory. It means that most Wiccan traditions do celebrate the changing cycles of the moon and the changing cycles of the year. That's why you hear the Wheel of the Year spoken about by Wiccans all the time. We will talk about Wheel of the Year at a different time. But that's kind of what that point means. It simply means that Wiccans celebrate the motion of nature, okay, the cyclical nature of everything. So the second principle of belief. We recognize that our intelligence gives us a unique responsibility towards our environment. We seek to live in harmony with nature, in ecological balance, offering fulfillment to life and consciousness within an evolutionary concept. This basically means we try to be environmentalists. We do our best. Are Wiccans perfect? Are environmentalists? No. No one's perfect, and let's be honest, humans in general are not very good at this. So why would Wiccans be any different? So this is saying we try to preserve nature, we try to do what is right for nature, and sometimes we'll meet that expectation and sometimes not so much, but we try. The third principle, we acknowledge a depth of power far greater than is apparent to the average person. Because it is far greater than ordinary, it is sometimes called supernatural, but we see it as lying within that which is naturally potential to all. So this is talking about magic. This is talking about there being more than meets the eye, which we already know is true. We know there's more than we can see, more than we can figure out, more than we understand. Even from a scientific perspective, we don't understand everything right now, and that's fine. We don't have to understand everything. This is just saying that though some people call things supernatural, nothing's really above nature. So what we believe in is what is already present in nature, even if we can't define it scientifically yet. So that's what that principle means. It means there's nothing outside of nature. If it exists, nature intended for it to exist. The fourth principle, we conceive of the creative power in the universe as manifesting through polarity, as masculine and feminine, and that this same creative power lies in all people and functions through the interaction of the masculine and the feminine. We value neither above the other, knowing each to be supportive of the other. We value sex as pleasure, as the symbol of embodiment of life, and as one of the sources of energy used in magical practice and religious worship. So what does this one mean? First, this means, yes, Wiccans have a goddess and a god. Okay, that is the general principle. I don't know why there's a dog making noise behind me, but that is the general principle. All right, so we have the masculine and the feminine, the god and the goddess. There are the two of them. What else does this particular one mean? It means we don't see sex as a sin. Okay, sex simply is. It's just a part of who we are. So there's no shaming for being sexually active, for example. The fifth principle, we recognize both outer and inner or psychological worlds, sometimes known as the spiritual world, the collective unconscious, inner planes, etc. And we see in the interaction of these two dimensions the basis for paranormal phenomenon and magical exercises. We neglect neither dimension for the other, seeing both as necessary for our fulfillment. So what does this mean? First of all, it means that we value both the physical and the spiritual equally. It means that your, for example, mental health is not less important than your physical health. It means that all parts of you matter. So just because you're not physically sick doesn't mean you're well. On another level, it also means that we acknowledge that most of what we call magic comes from the interaction of things that are not entirely compatible. So the interaction between the spiritual and the physical can give us an expression of magic, or at least what we think of as magic at this point in time. So that's kind of what that means. There can be a lot of different interpretations to that one, but that's just one of the more common interpretations. So the sixth principle, we do not recognize any authoritarian hierarchy, but do honor those who teach, respect those who share their greater knowledge and wisdom, and acknowledge those who have courageously given of themselves in leadership. Okay, what does that mean? It means we don't have some grand high witch sitting on a mountain somewhere telling the rest of us what we need to believe, what we need to do. That's not a thing in Wicca. It does also mean that you should have some kind of respect for someone who is teaching you. So it doesn't mean everyone is automatically entitled to respect just because they are teaching you something. It does mean that there should be a bare minimum of respect given to someone who is taking their time and making the effort to teach you anything. It could be Wicca, it could be something else. But you do owe a little bit of respect to somebody who is taking the time to do that, as long as they are doing that in good faith. So the seventh principle, forgive the adjustment of the camera, I knocked it over. So the seventh principle, We see religion, magic, and wisdom in living as being united in the way one views the world and lives within it, a worldview and philosophy of life which we identify as witchcraft, the Wiccan way, or the craft, or any number of other labels that we have given it over the years. So what does this mean? It basically just means that this is how we view the world, okay? Religion, magic, wisdom, everything is united together. They are not separate things. Everything is one. Everything derives from one place. So the 8th principle. This one kind of gets people's back up sometimes, but just listen. Calling oneself witch does not make a witch, but neither does heredity itself, nor the collecting of titles, degrees, and initiations. A witch seeks to control the forces within her or himself that makes life possible in order to live wisely and well, without harm to others, and in harmony with nature. So this one can annoy some people, but you're not a witch or a Wiccan or whatever label you use just because you use that label, okay? This is a actions speak louder than words kind of philosophy. This is a just because you call yourself Wiccan doesn't mean you are. And some people interpret this to mean, well, then you can't self-initiate. You can, depending on the type of Wicca you're going to practice. This doesn't mean that. This means you have to act in a way that is in harmony with your beliefs in order for that label to truly apply to you. So it doesn't matter what you call yourself, it more matters what you do and how you act. So the 9th principle. We believe in the affirmation and fulfillment of life, in the continuation of evolution and development of consciousness that gives meaning to the universe we know and our personal role within it. This one, there's a lot of different ways you can take this one. Some people take it to mean we believe in evolution, which we do. Yes, Wiccans believe in evolution because it's scientifically accurate. And Wicca does try to mostly keep in step with science. Religion and science don't really like each other that much, but Wicca tries. It makes an effort. So people sometimes take that to mean, so Wicca believes in evolution, which is true, and you can take that away from that principle. It also means we acknowledge that we have a role in the universe. It's very simple. We have a role in the universe, a part to play, even if we don't know what that part is. So the 10th principle of belief. Our only animosity towards Christianity or toward any other religion or philosophy of life is to the extent that its institutions have claimed to be the only way and have sought to deny freedom to others and to suppress other ways of religious practice and belief. This one was included because at that time, in the 70s, there was this idea that people who were Wiccan or were calling themselves witch were anti-Christian, and that is not really a tenet of Wicca. You shouldn't be anti-Christian because all religions exist equally, since no one can prove their religion is accurate anyway. The point of this one was to say, look, we're not anti-Christian. We just don't want you coming around and telling us that what we believe isn't true, because you can't prove what you believe either. So this is a live and let live message to the religious community. That's how that was designed. So it's not a no Wiccan is anti-Christian. Wiccans are human, and humans sometimes have prejudices. That happens. But as a whole, Wicca is not anti any other religion. Okay, it's not anti-religion because it is a religion. It's just anti-telling me that my religion is wrong. Okay, because all religions can suffer from the same problems. So this isn't one religion is better than any other. This is a let me believe what I believe as long as I'm not hurting anyone, and you go believe what you believe as long as you're not hurting anyone. So that's what that one's about. The 11th one, remember, this was designed by people who were Americans, so it specifically says American witches. So the 11th one says, as American witches, we are not threatened by debates on the history of the craft, the origins of various terms, the origins of various aspects of different traditions. We are concerned with the present and the future. So this one was just a, look, people argue all the time about where the craft came from, what the history is. Is it a continuation of an ancient religion? Is it a new religion? How much does it have in common with ancient practices? And a lot of those questions can be answered, but it's not worth the debate because it doesn't really matter. So that you don't really need to worry about that debate if you're going to be Wiccan. You can just put that aside and move forward, embrace the future, and kind of just leave that particular debate to people who want to have that debate. It's totally valid to have that debate and it's fine, but it's not necessary. We can set that aside and move on. So the 12th principle. We do not accept the concept of absolute evil, nor do we worship any entity known as Satan or the devil, as defined by the Christian tradition. We do not seek power through the suffering of others, nor do we accept that personal benefit can only be derived by denial to another. So again, this was in response to people saying, oh, well, you're just devil worshippers. No, because Wicca doesn't acknowledge the existence of the devil. You can't worship something you don't believe in. So that was an answer to that. And this is also important to note that Wicca specifically does not use the suffering of others for our own benefit, or we try not to. Now, no one's perfect. Again, I've said that a few times. Wiccans are no more perfect than any other people in the world. So the principle is, look, we don't want to benefit from suffering, but we all know that that's not always going to be true. I mean, we might not want to benefit from suffering, but the world is full of suffering, and sometimes that brings us unexpected benefits that we didn't intend. No one's perfect. So the idea that personal gain can only happen because you take something away from someone else, that is against Wiccan principles. You don't have to take something from someone else just to have it yourself. You can get it another way. That being said, we acknowledge that sometimes suffering does lead to benefits. It's not a good thing, but I mean, we try not to live in denial, right? So sometimes suffering is inevitable. That's just the way it is, but we try. So the 13th and final principle of belief. We believe that we should seek within nature that which is contributory to our health and well-being. So that just means we should seek out what is good for us. We should make sure that what we are doing is actually good for us. Sometimes this is interpreted to mean, well, I should be using herbs and aromatherapy and essential oils and all these things to cure me instead of going to the doctor. That's not what that means. Okay? If you're ill, go to the doctor, please. So it doesn't mean that we shouldn't, do things that are good for us. It means exactly that we should do things that are good for us, including going to the doctor, getting treatment when you're not well, because doctors exist in nature too. So this did not mean we should stop going to the doctor and use essential oils to cure everything. I like essential oils. They don't cure everything. They cure very little. They cure some things, but for the most part, if you're sick, go to the doctor. So this sometimes is taken to mean we shouldn't go to the doctor. We should use all natural all the time. All natural is not always good. This principle actually means you should do what is best for you. Okay? And sometimes that means you have to go to the doctor. So those are the 13 principles of Wiccan belief. And they are pretty common across most types of Wicca. Most groups have embraced them because they give you a vague and yet still kind of a definition of what Wicca might be for your particular group. So I hope that video was of some benefit to you, and I hope we'll be back next week with yet another video on Wicca or paganism or spellcraft, or maybe even another tarot video, though I hope I'm done with those for a little while and have moved on a little bit. Anyway, thanks for joining us tonight. Blessed be.